This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. And for an extra 10% off, use the code CFSPJ10 at checkout. Hello and welcome to the Equals for Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Brighton, but bringing my match review player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson and Bakary Sako after the game. So let's begin. Glenn Murray came back to haunt his former club as he scored 4 minutes from time to end Palace's interest in this season's FA Cup as Brighton ran out as the victors on the south coast. The Seagulls enjoyed the better of the first half and took the lead in 25 minutes when Dale Stephens drove home the opener, but Roy Hodgson's team improved after the restart and a thunderbolt of a goal from Bakary Sako put the cup tie on a knife edge. However, Murray would come off the bench to score from a yard out to put the Eagles out. And with all the pre-match hype about the use of video assistant referees, it wasn't asked for once during the encounter despite some question marks over Murray's winner. The only chance of a cagey opening saw Solly March nod a bomb cross into the turf and force Wayne Hennessy to tip over. But following a first-minute collision between Jeffrey Slupp and Izzy Brown, both teams were forced into early reshuffles as the pair became early casualties, despite trying to play through the pain barrier. After those stoppages that blighted the contest, Palace had a couple of glimmers on goal when Bakary Sako scrambled down the right and forced Tim Krul to save with his feet before the ball fell to Andros Townsend, but a diving Connor Goldson did well to block his on-target attempt. But after those scares, Brighton would go on to enjoy the more threatening moments in the first half, and on 17 minutes the Eagles received a huge let-off when an unchallenged Tomer Hamed headed a corner straight at a grateful Hennessy. However, 7 minutes later they weren't so fortunate as the hosts grabbed the lead. Shaletta received possession out wide and the right back took his time before playing the ball into the onrushing Stephens, and the Seagulls captain for the night continued his run to drive into the box before drilling the ball past Hennessy at his near post. As the first 45 wore on, Brighton continued to look the more likely to score but failed to test Hennessy again as Hamed headed over and then March saw a toe poke stab goalwards trickle to the Welsh stopper. But after the restart, Hodgson's team began the much sharper and enjoyed a lot more possession and attacks in the final third, without forcing Krul into a save. With 25 minutes remaining, it looked as though Chris Hughton's men would double their lead, when Hamed turned and shot inside the box but saw it deflect just wide of the post with David Propper heading over the resulting corner. But midway through the second half, a bolt from the blue drew the Eagles level. There seemed to be little on when the ball ricocheted off Hamed and fell to Sako 35 yards from goal, but after he took a touch, he unleashed a pile driver of a shot that zipped past the outstretched Krul and smashed off the inside of the post before finding a net in front of an ecstatic travelling support. 4 minutes later, the same man was looking to add to his sensational tally of 5 when he once again sped away from the home defence but lashed a fierce blast into the side netting. But the cup tie was alive again, and a minute later March got down the right before finding Sam Bullock who hit an upright. And after March retrieved possession, he got to the byline before picking out Behram Kaya on the penalty spot, who spooned his golden opportunity well over. A much more entertaining second half continued, with Hamed still unable to find a net as he looked another attempt goalwards which fell straight to Hennessy. And Bullock also continued to be wasteful in front of goal as he was slipped in but blazed well over when one-on-one with Hennessy. Therefore Murray would be introduced off the bench and with 4 minutes to go would make the telling impact. A free kick was chipped into the box by March and landed on the head of Mina, and he diverted the ball across the face of goal where the poacher was lurking, who got the slightest touch. Palace and Hodgson protested that it came off his arm before finding a net, but Andre Mario didn't consult the VAR and the goal stood to send them out of the competition. Crystal Palace are out of the FA Cup after losing 2-1 against arch-rivals Brighton Hove Albion at the Amex Stadium on Monday night. The Eagles fell behind to his Dale Stephens goal after 25 minutes, but equalised through a stunning strike from Bakary Sako as Palace looked to try and recreate their comeback win at Southampton last week. But a late winner from former Palace striker Glenn Murray sealed the win for Brighton, with the ball going in off the forwards' knee to set up a 4th round tie with Middlesbrough. So what do we learn from the game? Here are 5 things. Number 1. A lack of tempo. For large periods of the game, Palace lacked a cutting edge going forward without Wilfried Zaha and Christian Benteke in the side. They did threaten at times going forward, but never really looked like carving open the Brighton defence, which highlights the importance of Zaha in particular to the side. Number 2. Sako's improvement. Bakary Sako recently spoke about how Roy Hodgson has helped him to develop as a player, with the former Wolves man crediting the Palace manager for how he's made him a better player and helped him to adapt to the role of centre forward. And his improvement was evident as he offered a presence in attack, with his direct running causing problems for the Brighton defence. He had a few sights on goal and looked isolated at top at times, but when he did have a bit of space he took full advantage with a stunning strike in off the post from outside the box on his weaker foot. Number 3. Focus on the league. Roy Hodgson hinted beforehand that he would be making changes for the cup tie, and he stayed true to his word, with the Eagles manager making 4 changes from the side that won 2-1 at Southampton. But in leaving out key men Wilfried Zaha and Christian Benteke, Hodgson made his priority clear, with Burnley the visitors to Selhurst Park on Saturday in the Premier League. Number 4. Injury worries continue. Coming into this game, Palace were already stretched defensively, with injuries to Scott Dann, Bakary Sako and Joe Ward. But Jeffrey Lapp and Andros Townsend were both added to the list as they went off injured in the first half, providing more potential problems for Hodgson ahead of the game with Burnley. The Palace boss said that he initially fears that they will both be out for a few weeks, with Townsend leaving the ground in a protective boot and Slapp leaving on crutches. And number 5, all the fuss over VAR. There was much made of the first use of video assistant referee in domestic football in England, with the game being the first such to feature the technology. But as it was only used once, to confirm the legitimacy of Murray's late winner, with Brighton boss Chris Hughton admitting afterwards that it was his understanding that the goal had been reviewed by video referee Neil Strawbeck, who then communicated to the on-field referee Andre Mariner. It was at least a use for the technology and did nothing to disrupt the flow of the game, as had been feared by people ahead of it. The technology will now be used in the Carabao Cup semi-finals between Arsenal and Chelsea this week. So now I'm going to move on to the player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at @Crystal for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place to join in with discussions and share your opinions with other fans. And much like a forum, it's a great place to upload videos, photos and any news articles you found online that you want to share with other Palace fans, then do feel free to join the Facebook group, because the whole reason of it, much like a forum, is not only for people to post discussions in there and also share their own opinion and comment on other people's posts, but also it's a great place for you to share photos and videos of the game if you've got a picture of the goal posted in there, and also if you found an article online, whether it be a transfer, whether it be a player interview, whatever it will be, if you do have a link that you want to share it with other Palace fans, by all means do it in other forums, but do join our Facebook group so you can also post it in there. Now, another great place to share your opinion is in your YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do drop a comment below with your player ratings, rating the players' performances from 1 to 10, with 10 being the best. And you can do this along with your views of the game. Now, the only reason I want you to do this is obviously you come to the podcast to listen to my opinion and listen to what I thought about the game. But what I want you to do is, instead of just listening to me, I want you to comment below with your opinion so that I can look back at the video and compare my opinion to the listener's opinion, and also any other fans who come to the video, whether they be Brighton fans or whether they be Palace fans, they can come to the video and not only listen to my own opinion of the game, how I rated each player's performances, but they can also look in the comments section and see how other fans rated the players' performances. And even if you don't want to do player ratings, do comment below with anything about the game, whether it be the use of VAR, whether you want to comment about the goals, the defending, anything you want to comment about the game, do comment it below so that I can see it and see your opinion of the game, your perspective. But also any fans, any new subscribers who come to the channel to listen to the podcast, they can also see it as well and see how that opinion compares to theirs and how their opinion and your opinion does compare to mine. But if you do want to follow any of these social media pages and join the Facebook group, then do check all links that will be in the description below. But just to give you a small summary, obviously, before I go on to give you the player ratings, but obviously as this is a cup game, something I always do is that I don't normally give the full player ratings, and this is purely because not as many people are as interested in the cup as they are in the league. So especially this season, because the league is our priority, I think many people, even though it's against our rivals Brighton, will rather lose this game and not have extra games and be able to concentrate on the league, as opposed to going on a cup run where players will get injured, and of course when you get players injured it disrupts your league form and that will go downhill. So although obviously it's good to get an FA Cup run, actually the priority this season is obviously the league, but also not as many people are as interested in the FA Cup as they used to be. You know, it isn't as magic, people say, as it used to be, and it doesn't quite have that vibe of excitement that things did, you know, that it has done in the past. And although, like I've said, it would have been great to go on the cup run, with the injuries we've got at the minute, about 7, I'd rather us concentrate on the league and not go on the cup run and have to play extra games every few weeks, as opposed to having no extra games and actually preserving the squad and actually going forth and preserving our place in the Premier League. Now, obviously, we did lose against Brighton, which, of course, it is, you know, it's not very nice, obviously, because they're our bitter rivals. But really, if it, you know, the bragging rights come from the league. So they didn't beat us in the league; we drew with them. The last time we played them in the league, other than that 0-0 draw, was obviously in the you know, the playoff fight in the playoff semi-finals. So really, I think we've still got the bragging rights. But if Brighton go on the cup run, they're the ones who are going to feel the impact of it. So hopefully, because of that, we can overtake them in the league. But yes, obviously we did lose against Brighton. It's a bit embarrassing against our rivals. Quite a lacklustre game. But what you've got to remember, it was our second 11. So it wasn't not many first team or first starting 11 players. And also, there were quite a lot of fringe players in the squad and quite a lot of tired players as well. And Yohan Kabay in particular, our highlight as a tired player. So really, it isn't as bad as losing to our rivals in the league. So although it's not good, obviously losing to Brighton, it's not that great for the rivalry. But the fact that obviously it was with our second 11, with fringe players, with tired players, and the fact that it is in the FA Cup as opposed to a league makes it slightly better than it is. But like I said, I mentioned a minute ago, our squad at the minute is full of injuries. So really, a cup run isn't really ideal because we don't have the squad to cope. You know, we've got 7 injuries at the minute. That's almost, you know, that's almost a bench of players who are out injured. And even if you count up a few other players who have got minor knocks, that could make even a starting 11, a starting squad of injured players. So really, our squad is full of them at the minute, and it's not really our priority, and it isn't really ideal to go on a cup run. But like I've said in a minute, because obviously this is a cup game, and normally for cup games, whether it be the Carabao Cup, FA Cup, or whatever cup we're in, and pre-season as well, because of that, I'm not going to give you my full player ratings, but instead of that, I'm just going to give you a small summary of the game, and that's just where I analyse a player's performance. And you know, instead of going into quite a lot of detail where I analyse their performance, I'm just going to give you their rating, so simple 1 to 10 rating, and just a small summary of the game. So as opposed to giving you a summary, a rating, and just analysing the performance as a whole, what the players did, because it's a cup game, not as important, because we obviously lost and it's quite embarrassing losing to Brighton, then of course I'm not going to go into too much detail. So all I'm going to do, give you a rating, a small summary, and like I've said, it's mainly because it's a cup game. I always do this for cup games, and also it's purely because the league is more important at the minute. So really, not many people are going to be concentrating on our performance in the cup, because obviously it's the cup, but also because it's a second 11 team. So really, we expected some players like Damien Delaney not really to play that well, purely because they're not first team players, and you know, they wouldn't normally be anywhere near the first team. But like I've said, not many people care about the game, and also, you know, because it was a loss against our rivals, it's obviously quite embarrassing, but many people don't care because it's in the FA Cup. But like I said there, obviously you probably do know the result already, but it was a 2-1 loss in the FA Cup third round, and obviously it's our bitter rivals Brighton, so quite embarrassing there. But to be honest, the winner goes on to play Middlesbrough, so well done Brighton. They go to play Middlesbrough on a cold evening. That's fine. I'd rather, you know, lose and concentrate on the league as opposed to going up to Middlesbrough, which really isn't the nicest place to play, and especially in the 4th round, and they play at about the end of January. So whilst we hopefully be now without FA Cup, we'll be concentrating on transfers and the league, Brighton will be going up there to Middlesbrough and obviously having that distraction from their league form. But obviously in terms of the goal scorers, obviously Dale Stephens obviously scored first for Brighton in about 25 minutes. But, you know, quite bad defending from us. You know, Papa Soiré giving Stephens too much space to run in. Damien Delaney just being slow. And then Wayne Hennessy, he got a hand to it. But instead of being strong and parrying it out, he decided to flap at it, and it just went under him, under his arm. Didn't even take a touch of his leg, under his arm, and scored from close range. So really, 3 players in particular for me who were at blame, and in my opinion they're both not necessarily not first team players, but they're players who are quite fringe players at the minute, not really in the starting 11. You could argue Hennessy, but for argument's sake, they're all fringe players, not really that great recently. So really, you know, them 3, Delaney, Soiré and Hennessy, all at blame for the goal. But obviously Bakary Sako, absolutely fantastic equaliser, about 20-30 yards out from goal, cut inside with his weak foot midway through the second half, and obviously put the Palace support crazy right in front of the goal. And to be honest, he in particular, who I'll go on to talk about later, Bakary Sako, had an overall fantastic game. But obviously, although we equalised, it wasn't to be. And obviously, the former Palace player, Glenn Murray, we all knew it was going to happen. It was inevitable that he was going to score. But he popped up with the winner about 4 minutes from time. And obviously, to knock us out of the competition. But like I've already mentioned quite a lot already, we're not really that bothered about the FA Cup this season, purely because our main priority, like it was last season, like it was at the beginning of the season with the Carabao Cup, our priority at the minute is in the league. So rather than having a distraction of a cup run, I'd rather us, concentrate on the league. But like I've said there, first scorer Dale Stephens for Brighton. Obviously bad defending from 3 players there. Hennessy should be doing better there rather than just trying to get a touch on it and it just goes under his arm. Obviously Bakary Sako, great equaliser, probably one of the contenders alongside his goal against Leicester for the goal of the season so far. He obviously had a good game. And obviously Glenn Murray, we knew it was going to happen, but he scored against us and obviously knocked us out of the competition. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting in goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I'm going to give a 5. Made to tip over a downwards header which bounced up at him after 9 minutes. In a good position to hold Sam Baldock's header at him from a corner. Beaten at his near post through Stephens' powerful shot for the opening goal. Looked to be in for a busy second half as Brighton pinned Palace back but didn't really have any saves to make. Beaten at the far post due to the header which went across goal, which found its way in through Murray. Right back Timothy Fosu-Mensah, who I am going to give a 5. Brighton left back Bond was allowed too much space and time to get crosses in a few occasions in the first half. Not great overall. Centre back Martin Kelly, who I am going to give a 5. Positioning was fine. Not much else to comment on in the first half or the second half either. Average. Centre back Damien Delaney, who I am going to give a 5. Lost his marker for the first goal. Performance was similar to Kelly's. Bit of game time for the veteran too. Fairly comfortable second period. Left back Jeffrey Slupp, no rating. Went off early with an injury, so wasn't on the pitch long enough to make an impact. Midfielder Jara Riedewald, who I am going to give a 5. Quiet first half, not much to say. Got a little bit better in the second half protecting the back 4 but was booked. Midfield Yohan Cabaye, who I am going to give a 5. Neat and simple passes when required. A satisfactory performance but could have been better. Looked knackered. Midfielder James McArthur, who I am going to give a 6. Perhaps not his energetic self but didn't do much wrong on the ball. Got a good ball into Sako which nearly led to a goal. Got forward a lot more as the game went on and into the final third. Patrick Vanano, who I am going to give a 6. Deployed as a left winger but didn't play like one. Should have got forward a lot more in the first half but got better in the second half but without any major effect. One of the few players that come out with any credit. Winger Andros Townsend, who I am going to give a 5. Looked for an opening a couple of times but didn't really run at the Brighton defence. Had a goal bound shot that flicked over for a corner. Taken off at the break. And striker Bakary Sako, who I am going to give an 8. Some bursting runs on a couple of occasions, one in particular which nearly opened the scoring with a cutback. Had another one on 38 minutes, latching onto a MacArthur pass and forcing a corner. Palace's best player in the first half for his effort to make something happen, and more to hit with his weaker foot to equalise midway through the second half, a stunner. Now for the subs, Papa Soare a 5. The left back came on early for the injured Slupp. May have shown some nervous early touches but grew into the game and was fine. Not much trouble in the second half. Sully Kaikai a 5. The youngster replaced Townsend at half time. Went up front with Sako, tried but didn't really have any real impact. So there were just my player ratings and obviously what I thought about the players' performances. And of course if you do have any differing opinions to me, then of course do drop your player ratings below in the comment section. So obviously I can look back and see how you thought the players' performances were. But obviously before I go on to give you the man of the match in the later part of the podcast and obviously the interviews with Roy Hodgson and Bakary Sako, much like what I did at the beginning part of this section of the podcast, I obviously gave you a small summary of the game. I'm going to do more or less the same here, but this one's going to be more analytic and more based around the performance as opposed to the game, because at the beginning I was talking about the goal scorers and injuries, as opposed to here where I'm just going to talk about the performance as a whole and obviously what it means to lose the rivalry. But to be honest, it's obviously a disappointing game all round on the South Coast, because really neither team excelled, because really you would expect, it being a derby, both teams would be up for it, but really whether it's because the crowd was half empty and there was only 12,000 there, 10,000 Brighton fans, 2,000 Palace fans, whatever it was, no real team excelled and no team played fantastically. And yes, Brighton were better, but they weren't excellent. But to be honest, we had a few chances, and really, if you look back at the game, the performance we had, yes, it wasn't great, but there were so many chances we had where we could have taken the advantage, but we didn't. And after we got that terrific equaliser, we should have stayed strong and either played out for a draw, which would have been a replay, which isn't ideal, but I'd rather do that as opposed to lose to them. But really, the next bullet point really for me is that, yes, we did lose the game, and it's good hindsight now that we know that 2 players are injured, that we're not having a replay, because obviously no loss is good. Obviously, especially against your rivals, it's not really good to lose a game. But I'd rather lose this game but still have Jeffrey Schlupp and Andros Townsend not injured, as opposed to winning the game and having them injured. So really, that's the frustrating thing. And yes, we lost the game, but we paid that hefty price with obviously them 2 players returning back for training, obviously with injuries. So like I've said here, we had so many chances to win the game, or not necessarily to win the game, but to get something from the game. We didn't. And actually, maybe it's good hindsight, the fact that we've got so many injuries, that actually we didn't go on to stop another goal, and we didn't stop Glenn Murray. Maybe that's a good thing, because it meant that we didn't have the replay, and it meant that our players wouldn't have to go through more games, and obviously the injury list go worse. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise. But Jeffrey Schlupp and Andros Townsend, they could be out for a few weeks, which would be it would be a big loss for us. But obviously the fans are quite frustrated. Obviously, although I said at the beginning that not many people care about the FA Cup and the priorities league, yes, that's true, but it's still frustrating in terms of losing the game, and none more so than obviously Palace fan and manager Roy Hodgson. And you can understand it being a frustrating night for him, and he testified and he proclaimed that in the press conference, because really he would be disappointed with the result, because he put a team out there who he thought could put in a good performance, defend well, attack well. Obviously that didn't happen, and we went on to lose the game. But the thing he did obviously went on to proclaim about, other than the performance as a whole in the press conference, is the fact that the injury list that Palace currently had is the worst he's experienced as a coach. So when you consider he's managed Liverpool, West Brom, Fulham, he's managed loads of European clubs, managed loads of international teams. When you consider that he said this is the worst injury list, and he's been a manager in the game for around 40 years, that just shows how bad our injury situation is at the minute. And obviously it's not been made any better with the 2 injuries we picked up here. But to be honest, it's not really surprising. For me, the fact that we've got so many injuries and he said it's the worst is quite surprising. But when you consider how long he's been managing in top flight football and obviously lower league football, he obviously knows that actually, he's got the experience of knowing how bad injury situations are. And the fact that he said that ours was the worst he's seen just really shows how bad it is. And maybe, like I've said, maybe it's a good thing that we don't go to a replay, because that means that more players won't be tired and more players won't get injured. But on this showing, I think that I've seen this quite a lot on Twitter, but maybe some people, considering how big this rivalry is, we can really question from this game whether this is a true rivalry, because really there was a real lack of interest in the game. Other than the fact that it was VAR, there was no real hype about the game. And to be honest, maybe there was more harm than good, the fact that we had this in the FA Cup. And maybe it's just dampened the rivalry even more. Because yes, obviously, it wasn't a great result and the performance wasn't great, and there weren't tackles flying in here and there and everywhere. So it wasn't really that derby atmosphere. But also the fact that Brighton could barely sell out their stadium. The fact that they only had around 12,000 there, with 2,000 of them being Palace fans. So they only had 10,000 fans in a 24-seater stadium for a game against their rivals. So really, yes, the game on the pitch wasn't really great and no team really excelled in terms of winning the game, but also the derby atmosphere on the pitch was almost exactly the same as the one off the pitch. So really, it just puts question marks over whether this is really a true rivalry, because there was a lack of interest in the game, and maybe it's done more harm than good in terms of the whole perception of the Palace-Brighton rivalry. But overall, disappointing performance from Palace. Obviously, it would have been nice to get a win over Brighton. But much like what I explained at the beginning, I'd rather us concentrate on the league this season as opposed to going on a cup run. And like I've said, with all the injuries we've got at the minute, I'd rather us not go on the cup run to preserve our players. And obviously that will help us to concentrate on the league. I'm now going to move on to the Man of the Match award, but before I do that, I give you my Man of the Match and who I thought the biggest influence in the game. I'm now going to give you the nominations I put forward for the award. Now obviously in a game where the performance was so bad, it's actually quite difficult to give a Man of the Match, purely because even though it was a second string side, you would expect the players to at least put in a performance, and actually the performance wasn't there, because defensively we were quite poor, in terms of the 2 goals we conceded, and our overall defensive play was quite poor throughout the game. And also going forward, yes, we had people like Bakary Sako and Andros Townsend, Patrick Van Aanholt, who had the pace, and Solly Kaiko when he came off the bench. Yes, we had pace going forward, and we were not necessarily camped in our own half, but we weren't actually going forward as much as we would have liked, and the few times we were going forward we were quite wasteful. So really that just sums up our performance. You know, yes, it was quite a lacklustre game, and it was quite a bad performance in terms of a second string side, who really most of the players in there were proving that they're not going to get anywhere near the first team. But also it just shows that actually defensively we were poor, and going forward we were also quite wasteful as well. But to be honest, I can understand a few of the players, obviously with them playing loads of games over Christmas, they're being quite tired. But you would still expect them, you know, if Roy Hodgson puts them out there to put in a performance, you would still expect them to do that. But for me personally, despite the poor performance, there were 2 players in particular that for me, I thought you could at least put up for the Man of the Match award, and they do come out with any credit, and they are Patrick Van Aanholt and Bakary Sako. So really, I'd normally give a full shortlist of the players, normally 4 I do, but really, I just can't pick a Man of the Match purely because how bad the performance was, and the fact that overall there wasn't really any real quality in the game. But these 2 players obviously stood out for me because they gave slightly more in the game, and it looked like they were a little bit more interested than say other players were on the field. So in terms of Van Aanholt's performance, I thought that going forward, even though he's a left back, he was playing as a left wing back, sorry, a left winger. You know, whatever position he was playing, it was on the left hand side. And although, you know, he wasn't fantastic in the game, at least he was trying to use his pace to get in behind. He was trying to put crosses in, and when Bakary Sako was up front, he was trying to use his pace to link up well with him. So the fact that Van Aanholt had the urgency to actually try and use the skills he's got to take advantage was great to see, and the fact that he linked up well with Bakary Sako I liked as well. And you know, that's something that I do like about Van Aanholt. He comes up for a lot of criticism, especially this season, but actually this game just shows that actually if he puts his mind to it, he can put in a good performance. And unluckily here, obviously it didn't count for anything, but the fact that he was one of the better players on the field was good to see. Now in terms of Bakary Sako, obviously he linked up well with Patrick Van Aanholt, and obviously because of that he got quite a lot of the ball when we were going forward. And unlike some of the other players, when we were going forward, he wasn't quite wasteful, because whenever Bakary Sako got the ball, he'd drive forward, bring the ball forward, and obviously because of that he created a few chances. But the goal he scored was absolutely fantastic. You know, earlier on in this season against Leicester away, he scored that great goal where he curled it in top corner. Once again here, off the bar, from outside the box, weak foot, lovely curling effort, got it as far away from the keeper as possible. It was absolutely a fantastic goal. So for that goal alone, in the fact that even though we lost the game, for that goal alone, which you could say is one of the nominations up there for goal of the season in terms of our season, so that's great to see. But the fact that, like Van Aanholt, he had that attacking intent and he had the urgency to try and get something from the game is what I like to see, because overall it was a really poor team performance offensively and defensively. But these 2 players stood out for me and shone purely because, you know, they didn't have the biggest influence in the game, but because they tried and tried to have an influence in the game, tried to actually have that urgency to get something from the game. And like I've said, you know, we've got Patrick Van Aanholt here who, yes, he wasn't playing as left back, so he didn't have to do defensive roles, which obviously freed him up to go offensive, but I thought he used his pace really well. And in terms of Bakary Sako, like I said already, one of the goals of the season from him there, and he's just showing that if you give him a chance and if you can give him space on the edge of the box, he can hit them. And like I've said, even with his weak foot, he can hit them, and that's absolutely fantastic. And although obviously Benteke, you would say, is our first team striker, with the fact that we've got injuries and the fact that Bakary Sako's got form and Benteke doesn't, maybe Sako could start at the weekend against Burnley. And personally for me, because Andros Townsend is out injured, it's probably going to be Bakary Sako coming in. But based on this performance and his performances recently off the bench, I think he fully deserves it. And the same can go for Patrick Van Aanholt. I think that he deserves to get his place back in the starting 11 based on this performance, but also because obviously Slup's injured and Suarez didn't have the best game. But for me personally, if I did have to pick a man of the match, it would go to Bakary Sako. So congratulations, Bakary, on obviously winning your Man of the Match award. But for me, really, I don't think any real players deserve it. Obviously, he gets it for the goal, but really, the overall performance wasn't really that great. And really, there's not really any clear persons who actually deserve the Man of the Match award. But, you know, do comment below whether you think I'm correct in giving credit to Van Aanholt and Bakary Sako, and whether you think there's any other players, not that I think there is really, but if you think there's any other players who should have come out the game with any credit, but congratulations to Van Arnold and Sako. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson and Bakary Sako following the game.
Bakary, to come back and get back on level terms, it was disappointing to be knocked out such late on in the game.
Yeah, that was so frustrating to concede the goal like 2 minutes before the end of the game. And we done well to come back. The lads worked really hard. So yeah, we're really disappointed tonight.
From your personal point of view, to get us back on level terms with quite a strike, maybe tell us for your thoughts on that goal.
Yeah, I scored like a similar goal a few years ago. I've got like quite a good right foot as well, so as soon as I saw the ball, I just took my chance and lucky for me it was in.
And tonight was a good opportunity to get that goal because simply you were in the game from the start, wasn't it? You've been waiting for your opportunity and you'd believe that you've taken it well over the 90 minutes.
Yeah, every time the gaffer like plays me, I'm trying to do my best, and I was trying to do that as well tonight. So yeah, that's a bit frustrating because we done well second half, and to be knocked out like that, it's been hard.
And the actual match, obviously the manager had to change around the team because of players that are out injured, but it does give other players an opportunity to show the gaffer what they're about.
Yeah, this is what we're waiting for, the chance to play. And we had some injury in the team, so the gaffer like made some changes. So this is the player chance now to show what we're capable of.
And it's game time for them as well as that.
Yeah, that's for me. That was good to get 90 minutes under my belt. But yeah, as I said, it's hard tonight because we've done well to come back and consider that last minute is difficult.
Disappointing, obviously, to be out of the cup, but it is the league that is the priority, and soon back on that on Saturday against Burnley.
Yeah, we back at it on Saturday against Burnley, so we're gonna recover, train hard again, and be ready for Saturday.
So even though you got the goal, obviously the delight was wiped out, but generally over the celebrations in with our crowd behind the goal, I mean, it was quite some scenes for you with the Palace fans.
Yeah, I'm getting along with the Palace fans, so that was nice for me to get that goal tonight and celebrate it with the fans as well.
Reflections on the late defeat for us there.
Well, the reflections are with the two injuries for me. That's what's completely spoiled my evening, more so than the defeat. I thought they played quite well in the second half, the players. I thought we did well to get back into the game at 1-1 and probably deserved that. But of course the late goal from Murray, which was contentious, but quite probably the VAR system helped the referee out, and perhaps it was a goal and not handball, as all of our players who were close by were convinced that it was. But for me, losing Townsend and Schlupp is everything. You know, we just can't afford that. With 7 players out injured before today, to lose 2 more of our regular first-team players, this has been an enormously costly Christmas period, an enormously costly FA Cup match, because at the end of the day, our major aim is to stay in the league. But to do that, we need players, and we need the players who've been helping us to win games recently, fit and healthy and ready to play. We tried to protect as many as we possibly could tonight, and we weren't able to protect too many, and that's why Jeff Schlupp and Townsend, of course, end up playing, because we literally do not have anybody to replace them. We couldn't weaken the team even further than we'd done, and now to lose those two to injuries for me is an enormously crushing blow. I'm bitterly disappointed about that, and of course I'm disappointed to lose the game, because I thought it looked for all the world we were going to get at least a draw from it.
Just touching on that second half performance, because you spoke last week to us about how Bakary Sako had the opportunity to come in. He took that opportunity tonight. You must be real pleased with his performance,
Yeah,
and of course the goal.
Very pleased with him throughout the game, and of course his goal crowned out. I thought one or two of the players who haven't played such a lot recently, who got the chance today, did more than well enough. But as I say, for me at the moment, it's a feeling of enormous disappointment and sadness, because I'm seeing Jeff Schlupp and Andros Townsend leave the ground with crutches, and really and truly that's the last thing I wanted from this game. We took a bit of a chance in not playing everybody that we could have played, i.e. Luca and James Tompkins, but everyone else basically had to get out and play tonight. And really, it's only Luke and James I've been able to spare, and I've lost 2 more for the weekend. That for me says everything at the moment.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson and Bakary Sako had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Brighton. But make sure to comment next week for our post-match review of the game against Burnley. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.